I've not told this story to anyone in a very long time, but I still remember it very vividly. It's one of those flashbulb memories, and it used to haunt me for the longest time. I was 12 years old at the time this happened. It was a Friday, and I was at school. It was a very, very windy day, and after a little while, it began getting quite overcast as well. The clouds were very dark, and it just got darker and darker as time passed by. I spent a bit of time in class watching the weather out the window, because at the time I really enjoyed that sort of thing. It was very windy as I was walking home. Most of the students that went to that school walked rather than took a bus. It was a semi-urban area we lived in, I suppose. I lived in a subdivision that was not that far away from the school, but it was still a pretty decent walk home. I enjoyed it though, walking with the storm brewing above me. It began thundering on my way home, and that did start to concern me just a little bit. I didn't want to get too wet after all. I also could be scared of thunder and lightning, but that was normally only if I was in bed by myself in the dark. Outside, walking through the neighborhood, it definitely didn't bother me at all. I was lucky though, and I made it home before any rain actually began falling. I was lucky because whenever it stormed lately, my mom would make cans of Chef Boyardee Pac-Man pasta for me to eat. This was during the 80s, during the period of time where basically everything was Pac-Man. I even loved the pasta cans because you could take the label off and there were these little games and trivia on the inside of the label. It was all very fun. The storming went on for a very long time, and unfortunately it continued through the time for me to go to sleep as well. My parents actually went to sleep not very long after I did, so that didn't help make me comfortable, alone in my room with the storm. I'm not really sure how long I laid there actually, especially after I heard my parents go to their bedroom to fall asleep. I just remained there in bed, watching the light from the bolts bounce off the wall, illuminating some things while making shadows of others that likely did not exist. But eventually, being young and very tired, I did manage to fall asleep. A while later though, I suddenly woke up, and when I did, there was this very weird feeling. It's hard to explain what had happened. If you've ever woken up like that, it's like you feel like someone hit you or something. When you open your eyes, you're not quite sure where you are or what's going on. As my eyes began to adjust, I saw the scariest thing I had ever seen. Standing by the side of my bed was this man with a knife. He was right beside me, and obviously something about his presence is what woke me up. I wanted to scream, but I was frozen in place. I didn't know what to do. Time also seemed to be frozen, and it seemed like everything was moving in slow motion. I was able to let out the very beginnings of a scream before he took his gloved hand and put it over my mouth. I was terrified, and in that moment I thought for sure I was going to die. He took the knife and put it up to my throat. I was breathing heavily, and tears were streaming down my eyes. I kept waiting for him to slice my throat open, but he was taking his time, like he was enjoying my fear, and that made it all the more scary. There was a loud crack of thunder, which was immediately followed by another. For some reason that I can't quite understand, the man suddenly dropped the knife and fell over on the ground. It was so weird, and I didn't know what had happened at first. When the lights switched on, I saw my mother standing in the door, holding her gun in her hand. It was obvious then that she had shot the guy who had had the knife to my throat. She hadn't quite killed him, but he didn't get back up either. She ran and got me off the bed and out of the room, constantly holding the gun at the now groaning intruder. She instructed me to go down the hallway to her room, while she waited at the door with the gun to keep him from getting up. I guess my dad had called the police while my mom came in with the gun. My mom was going to the bathroom when she noticed my door was closed. She never let us close the door while we were sleeping. She then heard the start of my scream that had been cut off, so she ran and got the gun, threw the door open, and didn't hesitate to shoot the man standing at my bed. The man was arrested after. I won't mention his name because I don't want people researching who I am or anything. They'll just start asking me questions about the experience, and honestly, I don't want to answer them. It took me forever to consider letting anyone read the story to begin with. This really might not seem like the scariest story, so I'm sorry if it doesn't scare anyone, but it was really scary to me when it happened. When I began going to school, I always walked to school. In K through 2nd grade, my mom always walked with me, but when I began the 3rd grade, I began to walk by myself. It didn't really seem like a big deal at the time, and pretty much everyone was doing it anyway. There were always bunches of kids walking to school. On the walk there, we always came down a road with another road that led into a forest. We never took that road that went to the forest, but that road, which was actually more of a path than a road now that I think about it I guess, had a small bridge right on the edge of the forest. There was a big circle metal tunnel underneath that bridge, and you could always see it looming in the distance. Now, I never really thought anything about that bridge when I was walking to school with my mom. But once I began walking alone, I began hearing these strange stories about that bridge. The boys in school had all these different ideas about what might be underneath in that tunnel. We were young, and we had heard the story about the billy goat's gruff, so it was natural for us to wonder. There were often people, adults of course, that we saw walking toward the forest. Since it was a trail, a lot of people would be jogging on it too. But we also never saw anyone walk under the bridge through that tunnel. When I was in the 5th grade, I had a group of friends that I regularly walked to school with. As you're probably well aware, 5th grade boys have a lot of bravado. We were always daring each other to do some stupid things or do things that were potentially really scary. And of course, this included talking about that metal tunnel. At this point in time, there was a very specific story going around about that tunnel. At the time, the story was that there was a serial killer living underneath the bridge. He would lure children underneath and kill them there, and that had been going on for a very long time. One day my friends and I were hanging out after school. We were talking about what to do, when one of my friends dared me to walk through that tunnel. I really did not want to, but you know the way young boys are. I was being called a chicken amongst many other mean names for hesitating. And when that happened, you know I had to go through with it. So, we began walking on the trail over to the forest. I kept telling myself that people jogged on this trail all the time. If there was a serial killer living in that tunnel, people would definitely know about it. I wished that I had the power to take away the fear I was feeling, but I unfortunately did not. Once we got over to the bridge, I was dared to walk down to the little ditch that ran through the tunnel and walk through the entire thing. At this point, the boys were not going to come any further. I had to do that part by myself. So, I did. I walked down and got to the bottom of the ditch. My heart was racing, scared that I would be killed. The mind of a 10-year-old can come up with almost anything. Well, when I got to the bottom of the ditch, I looked over at the tunnel. It wasn't a very long tunnel, but it was very dark right in the middle. I could see over to the other side, and I could see the light there as well. And it didn't seem like anyone was inside. I suppose, though, that someone could be sitting down in the middle where I couldn't see. I began walking toward the tunnel. It smelled absolutely horrible. The smell was overwhelming. I stepped cautiously into it. I walked a few steps forward, my eyes darting around. I yelped when I saw someone in the tunnel. It was like I thought. There was someone sitting down in a dark spot. I was terrified, and I almost ran out, but then I stopped. As I took a closer look, I realized that the person in the tunnel was not moving at all, and it seemed to be a very small person. So instead of running, I walked over to them. I did it very slowly. If he or she jumped and came after me, it would have been terrifying, so I wanted to be able to run and get away if I could. Once I got close enough, though, I noticed it looked like a boy around my age. I called out to try and get his attention, but he didn't respond. I nudged him a few times, and he didn't respond to that either. Then I noticed the smell coming from him, and that his skin was this ghastly color I cannot even begin to describe. I thought he must have been dead. I immediately thought of the serial killer, and I just panicked. I ran out of that tunnel as quickly as I could, expecting to see the killer come out after me. I was already on the farther side of the tunnel, so I ran out that way. My friends were all very excited I'd gone through the entire thing, but they could tell I was scared. I told them I'd seen a dead boy under the bridge, but they didn't believe me. I kept telling them I was telling the truth, and we had to go to the police, but they just wouldn't believe me. I went back to the school with my friends and told the principal about it. He ended up calling the cops, who then went out to the tunnel right away. At first, my principal thought it was a prank, because he knew about the stories of the child killer who lived under the bridge. I think, though, the sheer fear in my eyes convinced him that he had to make sure just in case. It was, in fact, a dead boy that was found under the bridge. He had been kidnapped from a different state, and apparently had been missing for months. They had been unable to find him or the kidnapper. The boy, it seemed, had died from suffocation. The police suspected it was an accidental death during the kidnapping, and the kidnapper had hid the body in the tunnel and fled. I don't really know what happened with the case. I've checked several times to see if I could find any information on it, but I haven't seen any updates. I was so afraid that day, and I've never been that scared, before or after. This story might be a bit too graphic for some people. It's not a story about a fictional monster, an intruder, a robber, or anything like that. Instead, it's the story of a woman named Elaine, who the Navy made our live-in babysitter after my parents got divorced. The things that woman did to me have scarred me to this day. I found out that often the scariest people are the ones who you let into your life willingly. I was 11 years old, I think. I don't know for sure. But my dad had just gotten custody of us, and he had to often go out to sea. The Navy provided a live-in babysitter for the children, me, my brother, and sister. The first one was Lee. She was pregnant and so nice and kind, but she had to move out after a weekend. She was crying when she left and told us that she loved us. We found out later she quit because my father was making sexual advances to her. After that, Elaine moved in with her son Aries, and yeah, that was actually his name. Elaine was a large and scary woman. She was also a Jehovah's Witness. Yes, that is important to know that because she didn't celebrate holidays. We kids loved them, but she always looked down on us for liking them. She would often throw out gifts we got for the holidays because she thought it was wrong for us to have them. My first problem with Elaine was when one of my Transformer toys fell on the ground and she stomped on it. With absolutely no regard for it, she took every single robot toy I had and threw them all in the trash. When I began crying, she told me to stop crying, but I couldn't. So when I didn't, she threw away all of my He-Man toys too. She threw away every toy I had, and my dad did nothing about it. My brother David was the only protector I had. He grew up to be the toughest man I've ever known in my life. But even he wasn't always able to be there when the evil of this woman came out. My brother had this glow-in-the-dark mask at the time. I wanted to wear it just once to have some fun. It looked so awesome. But while I was wearing it, Elaine came into the room and noticed it. She tore it off my head and told me it was a sin to use someone else's property without asking first. Elaine made me stand by my bed. I had to put both of my hands on it, and she read something from the Bible about stealing. It was ridiculous because I didn't steal anything. My brother and I had always shared toys. It's just what we did. But as I stood there and listened, and looked at the belt that was lying by her hand, I knew what was coming. Elaine took that belt and began beating my hands with it. She did it over and over and over, and didn't stop until my hands were red and covered in welts. I was crying my eyes out, and she kept screaming at me to stop. The more I cried, the more and more she would hit me. I was 11 years old and scared and in pain. My central nervous system made me cry, something that evil bitch never understood. She hit me so hard it caused my hands to bleed. When I was in the 3rd grade, I broke my wrist. My worthless father never took me to the doctor for it, even though we were a Navy family and it would have been totally free. To this day, my hand is still lame because of that. She broke the bone again when she began attacking me. After this vicious beating, I cried for hours on my bed. My dad confronted her about it, and I'll never forget her response to him. I did it out of love. Fucking bullshit. Love? I'm sorry for getting angry. I've never told the full story before, and I wanted to tell it to you like I'm just talking. I'm sort of putting every thought down on this imaginary piece of paper. Aries, though, he was a good kid. I always felt really sorry for him. He was obviously gay. He and a boy named Tony always held hands together in school. Aries would also braid his hair in class, but we would often play video games together and Uno. He even gave me a Peter Porker The Amazing Spider-Ham comic, even though I wasn't supposed to have them. I wonder about him often, and what happened to him. There was also this period of time where Elaine decided the whole family had to ignore me. They would do things all together without me. My sister wanted me to join in too, and kept asking me to, but Elaine would yell at her and order her not to talk to me. My dad didn't do anything about it until my sister began sobbing because she wanted to talk to me. My dad never showed me an ounce of love in my life, but he was very overprotective of my sister. They got into a heated argument over this, and he told her to stop ignoring me, and if she ever did that again, he would immediately fire her. So, how does a story like this climax? A week before Thanksgiving, me, my sister, and my brother, including Aries, all caught the flu. We had it really, really bad. I mean, I almost even died at one point. Well, lying in bed recovering, I was very bored. Time went by slowly, and I was hot, my stomach was hurting, and my head was hurting too. It was like being stuck in hell. Elaine, at one point, decided unsweetened peppermint tea would be the perfect thing for us kids. I'm a big tea drinker, actually. A cup of Earl Grey hot makes my life. But that tea was fucking horrible. My sister and I kept getting ill from drinking it. We would run into the bathroom and throw it up, but Elaine just kept making us drink it. We barfed about 4 times each. When we were crying, she threatened to beat us with a fly swatter if we didn't stop. When my sister tried to pour the tea in the toilet because she was throwing up, Elaine caught her, yelled at her, and made her a full new cup. She made her drink it and throw up even more. I wanted something to do, so I asked my dad for a drawing pad. I'm not a good drawer exactly. My brother, sister, and Aries all had art talent, but at the time, I didn't know what mine was. Elaine decided that she would take the drawing pad from me because I was trying to copy Aries and David. She actually forbade me from ever drawing again, and again threatened me when I cried because of this. My temperature at the time went up to 104. Everyone else was getting better, but I just wouldn't. They wouldn't take me to the hospital, though. I lay there hot, delusional, and scared that I would die alone in that bed. My dad brought me the drawing pad back and gave me a Pepsi and some Oreos. Not like sick food. I knew he gave it to me because he thought I was going to die, and that just made it worse. Well, obviously, I did not die. If I did, this story would be proof of the afterlife. But I was terrified. Every time I dozed off, I began crying, wondering if I would never wake up and everything that used to be me would be wiped into oblivion. I eventually got better from being sick, but the abuse did not get better. Finally, my dad fired her by sliding a note under her door. That evil woman left, and I never laid eyes on her again. That's not the scariest part of this story. This story is terrifying for another reason. I know that if I ever found her, and I'm not explicitly trying to, I would hurt her. I wouldn't be able to help myself. I'm the most peaceful person you could ever meet. I hate violence, but I would kill her. I don't like feeling sorry for myself, and there are people in the world who have been abused much worse than I had, but I still have this rage in me, and that rage is scary too. I feel like if I ever see her again, I will unleash all that anger on her. And I'm not that kind of person. But she whipped my hands with a belt and made me afraid every day in my own home. And that's unforgivable. What is up, guys? Blue Spooky here as always. Thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you made it this far to the end of the video. I would also like to give a special shout out to my friend Killer Orange Cat, who is also a narrator here on YouTube that reads true scary stories. He has allowed me permission to use stories submitted to him in his subreddit in my videos. So if you like these stories, please be sure to go check him out, as he is a very good narrator as well, and he puts out content every week. If you guys enjoyed my narrating style and the content of this particular video, please be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe if you feel so inclined. If you do decide to subscribe, make sure to hit that bell button and turn notifications to all if you would like to be notified of every video I post in the future, although I post a video every day when I can, so if you just come back to the channel every so often, you'll not have missed very much. If you guys would like to get in contact with me for any reason, you can go ahead and take a look in the description below the video. You will find links to all of my social media, including my Gmail, Twitter, and Facebook accounts. Send me a message on any of those, and I will try to read them as soon as possible. You can also send me a message on any of those to submit your own scary story experience for me to read in the video. If you do decide to submit a scary story, please be sure to include in the tagline what the name of the story is if it has one, what the theme of the story is if it has one, and how you would like to be credited in the description of the video the story appears in. If you do decide to send in a story, please be sure to include proper grammar, and please include as much detail as you feel comfortable sharing, as that makes it much easier and more likely that it will end up in a video in the future. I also have two other channels if you like my voice, called Mr. Blue Skies and Darkest Hour respectively, where I do weekly true crime vids and monthly documentaries on dark things that happen in history. If you like my voice, check them out. Maybe those contents will be for you. Overall though, guys, I think that's pretty much it for now. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you guys have a great day.